So we're going to go into the line, make it coincident. When you click that, you should be a coincidence symbol that'll show up. And then we're going to bring it down here and make sure you get that other coincidence symbol. Okay. And when you do that, then you can go ahead and hit OK, and that's attached that. So what that's done by making that coincident, that means that these guys are going to move together. They're constrained together, but they're not constrained exactly the way we might want them yet. Okay. But to give you an idea how these constraints work, we can click on objects here, and we can drag them around. So if you click on this line here and you drag it over this way, you'll notice because of the way the constraints work, it'll do stuff like that. So that was a major update right there because of the way the things were constrained. Did everybody see how that worked? Our circle will essentially do the same thing. So if you take and click on your circle, you can drag him around and change both his size and his location. Notice as you drag that circle, the line stays affixed to it. Okay. And the same thing would be true down here. If I drag this line, notice how that line stays fixed to that. So that's what those constraints and those coincidence features allow us to do. Okay, does that work? All right, so we're going to drop a general dimension down here. I'm going to put a dimension that is going to give it a constraint. I'm going to put a dimension from this edge to the center of the circle, and I'm going to drop him up here. So we're not going to worry about the size of this guy right now, but he is adding an additional constraint now. Okay. So as we constrain this down, we're going to see how this all will work for us. Okay. So, yes. Dimension from that edge to the center of the circle. Touch the center of the circle. There you go. Okay. There you go. Okay. Yep. All right. So this constraint is nice, but the fact is that it's not tangent, which is what we would really like to see. So we're going to add an additional tangent constraint to this. So we're going to go up to the constraints up here, grab the tangent constraint. You want to select the line and then the circle, and you should notice it should jump tangent for you. Okay, so now as that thing moves, that thing will move in a tangent mode. Okay. Then you can go ahead and right click OK there. Do that. Okay. All right, so I'm going to go up here to tangent, select its line, select the circle, right click, and I'm going to OK that. So that guy, if we move that thing, I don't know if it's going to, yeah, you can notice if you move it, notice how it's moving tangentially, okay, to that. All right, is that working? So we're now going to add some trims and extends to this. So what I want to do is I'm going to want to extend a line. So I'm going to go into the extend trim. There's extend right there. I'm going to come down here and extend that line right like that. Okay. So notice it's a little bit easier than it does in AutoCAD, because in AutoCAD you have to select the boundary and then you have to tell it what to extend. Well, it pretty much already knows. It'll find those boundaries for you, which is pretty cool. Also, the trim and the extend work the same way, so that if you are in the extend mode, which we are, we can simply come down here, hold the shift key, and we can trim that off. So it'll work two ways. Okay. So the other thing we're going to want to do is eventually trim the circle off, but we're going to wait on that. So we're done with the trim and extend. So I'm going to go ahead and right click and hit OK. Now, what I want to do is make sure that the center of that circle is coincident with that line projected. So we're probably either above it or below it. So what we're going to do is fix that. So I'm going to grab a dimension and I'm going to go from that line to the center of that circle. And it looks like mine, let me do something, because mine doesn't look like it's, let me see if it's going to let me do that. Okay. All right, so let me try that again. if I try to dimension that to that, I should have a dimension right there, okay? And what we want to do is make that dimension 0. I think mine was actually locked to 0, okay? So what we want to do is make this so that that line projected out is right at the center of the circle. So that's a further constraint that we placed on that. Are you guys all getting that to work? Is that good for everybody? Okay. So what we now have is we have pretty much all of our constraints. We have a tangent constraint here. These are all perpendicular, those kind of things. So you can also show your constraints. Remember, if you want to show constraints, I can come up here to this tool here, show constraints. You can click on where you've got constraints and it'll pop up those constraints for you if you're interested in looking at those. All right. That doesn't really do anything for you other than to show you what's going on there. So I want to now go in and I want to place another constraint. I want to place a distance constraint. So I'm going to right click, OK that. I'm going to place another constraint from dimensionally. I'm going to place it from the top line to the bottom line and pull it in over here. And just accept the value. Don't worry about what it is. Okay? And if you want to do a zoom all, you can see your total picture as big as it'll show up. Okay. Okay. So Inventor has this thing called auto dimensions. What's kind of neat about it is if you let it do it, it'll put all your constraints in there and it'll show you like how many constraints you need to fully constrain this thing. So if we go up to the dimension section, the very top one right here is called automatic dimension and constraints. If you click on that, you'll get this box that'll show up. And it'll show you right now how many constraints you need to have this thing what we call fully constrained, which means everything's fixed the way you want it. So right now I'm showing 6 constraints. Is everybody, or 6 that I would need to place to fully constrain it? Does everybody see that? And if you think about it, I don't know what this distance is here. I don't know what that distance is there. I don't know what that distance is. I don't know what that radius is. So those are what it's talking about. Also, it can lock it into a fixed location. Like what is its reference to the origin, which is this guy right here. If you go ahead and hit apply, you'll notice it popped all those constraints on there for you. And now it says 0 dimensions required to constrain it fully. And you notice a lot of the dimensions that I talked about, it just put in there. Okay, so it fixed those. So you could accept those if you wanted to. We're not worried about that. So we're going to go ahead and remove the constraints. And we're going to close this for now. We'll come back to this in a sec because I want to show you we're going to place our own. So I'm going to close this box. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a few constraints. So I'm going to add a dimension right here, which we said we needed. I'm going to add a dimension from the outside to that edge right there. And I'm going to add one right there. And I'm going to add one to this guy right here. And before I tell you what, before you do that one, we may have to redo that one. I'm gonna just delete this one. Whoops. I want to trim my circle first. So one of the things I want to do is trim this guy out. So I'm going to go and do a trim. Should just be able to touch that. If you have a dimension in there, you may have to delete the dimension first. Okay. So I kind of jumped the gun on that. So I'm going to now be able to constrain this with a radius diameter dimension. Okay. So there's my constraints. So my part should almost be fully constrained at this point, other than the fact that I maybe don't have it locked down. Okay. So we're going to go in and we're going to do one more thing. We're going to place fillets at selected corners. So I'm going to fillet a corner here. I'm going to fillet this corner. I'm going to fillet this corner, and I'm going to fillet this corner. Now we're going to do this all with the same fillet command, because when we do an edit, it'll edit everything for us at one fell swoop, okay? So we're going to go to the fillet. We're going to go to the fillet, which is up here. And it has a value in it. Mine's got 2 millimeters. We're just going to rip with that. So I want you to select your arc and select your line. And then come down here. We're going to select that line to that line, and that line to that line. Those are our fillet bin locations. All right. So now we have this thing pretty much fully constrained. If we right click and hit OK, if you come back up here to your auto dimension, you might see that you have a couple of constraints that are needed. And the reason that there's 2 constraints needed is because this thing can float left and it can float right, up and down. So those are the 2 that are missing. So if you really wanted that locked down to a specific point, you could do that. So for instance, if we constrained the center of the circle, we could come up here. Come on. This thing. If I come up to that little lock and select the center of that circle, I've locked that. If I look at my constraints now, I have 0 required. I'm now fully constrained because it can't move left and it can't move right and it can't move top to bottom. Okay? Everybody get the idea? Okay. So we're going to now go in and fix our geometry to what we want it to really be. So I'm going to just hit close this constraint box. And I'm going to start up here at the top. I'm going to double click on this guy. We're going to make that 200. Now it's going to start to whack stuff out. So if it gets real whacked out, don't worry about it. It should fix it. We're going to make this left, this big one right here, we're going to make that 120. Okay, that should do the major fix on it. And then we're going to come back and do the rest of them. So I'm going to have this little piece right here, this bottom piece here. That's going to be 180. Okay. I'm going to make this guy right here 50. And this guy right here 40. And we're going to make our radius here 45. Okay. So that should be the basic 200 across the top, 120 on the side here, 180 on the bottom. And then we got 50 and 40. Okay. You've got another constraint in there. It was doubly constrained, so the one was constraining the other. Okay. Okay, so we've got 200 at the top. We've got 120 on the side, 180 in the bottom. Those are the major ones. Your arc should be at 45. This is 50 down from top to that little corner nook. And then it's going to be 40 from that corner nook to that corner nook. Okay? So the other thing we're going to do is change the fillet values. So we want to make the fillet values 20. Notice, because we did them all at one time, there's only one that's showing up. So I'm going to double click on that one, and I'm going to make that 20. And it should fix all of them for you. Okay? So that's what your part should look like. Okay? So the cool thing here, when we did the one fillet and placed them all at the same time with the same operation, they're all linked to the same value. So when you clicked on change the one, it changed them all. Okay? Did everybody get that to work? Okay. So we are done with our sketch. We're going to finish the sketch. And what you now have is the outside part of what we would call our gasket, essentially. So we're going to go ahead and do whatever we would do to this. You might revolve it. You might sweep it, loft it. We're going to do what's called an extrusion like we've been doing. So we're going to go ahead and go into the extrusion, extrude it, and it'll automatically pick up your profile, which it did for me. And I'm going to change that. If it's 10 millimeters, I'm going to make that 5 millimeters. And then hit OK. So you should have a gasket. Looks like that. If you kind of zoom around it, you can kind of see what it looks like. It should be real thin. It's only a 5 millimeter thickness. And it doesn't have to look exactly like mine. If you're not quite there, don't worry about it. Ultimately, though, I'm going to get it into an isometric view. So if you hit the F6 key, it should take you into an isometric view. Okay. So what we're going to now do is we're going to take that sketch that we used and we're going to use it to do something else with, but we're not going to do it on the surface that the sketch is. So we're actually going to bring the sketch up to a different level of working. Okay. And then we're going to do what's called an offset. And then we'll be able to extract that out. Now, if you're reading through the book, the author is going to take you through this process of being able to redefine your sketch and those kind of things, which you can go through. We don't need to look at that today. That's not really important for what we're going to get into, but it's kind of interesting to see. But we're going to look at how we can create a cut feature using an offset and then extrude that and punch that through. Okay. So also keep in mind on your constructive solid geometry tree over here, you have the extrusion, you have a sketch. Anytime you would want to edit that sketch, remember we've looked at several different ways, but to me the easiest way to edit that sketch is if you need to edit it, you just double click on the sketch that's associated with the extrusion. You can look at that sketch, then you can edit it, okay? And then when you're done, you can hit finish. And any change you would have made here would have changed the extrusion as well, okay? Is everybody good with that? All right, we are going to create an offset feature. So we are going to go into start a sketch, and we're going to pick the front face of that gasket. Now, here's the thing to keep in mind. The front face is above where the actual sketch is that was created. So the sketch was actually on the lower face, okay? But what we're going to be able to do is project that up, okay? We're going to use this process called projection, so it's kind of neat to do. So I'm going to go ahead and select the top face. All right. And we're going to go into this guy called project geometry. So project geometry. Now, if you want to see it happen, you might want to kick this a little bit this way. You're going to want to come down and select the geometric area right there. Actually, notice whatever I'm touching, it should have just it's projecting it up. Notice how it's doing that. I think if you do it from the top, it actually does it all of it. So just notice that you should get a yellow line around the entire thing. And notice the yellow line is actually projecting the geometry from that face up to that face. If you're not getting that yellow line, it's not happening right for you. So is everybody getting that to work? You actually don't have to go into the jointed, Kevin. You just get the, did you get a project geometry? You gotta go up to, oh, okay, you're not in a sketch. You gotta go into the sketch. Select your top surface. Okay, now we're gonna do a project geometry. Just get here, it should project geometry. See the, kind of go to the flip. You see the yellow? Yeah, you're good, you're good. Anybody else okay? So you took the geometry and you moved it up, okay, so that we can work with it. You're not in there, so you never extruded it. Just go ahead and extrude it. It's not going to hit that. Just go ahead and extrude it. That's fine. Okay, then. So now we're going to do another sketch. Get the top surface there, okay? We're going to project geometry. It's actually, see the yellow line there? Okay. So that's a really pretty cool tool. When you get involved in other aspects of Inventor, that's an important thing. So what we're going to now do is do what's called an offset, and we're going to offset this projected geometry. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and right-click and hit OK to terminate my project geometry. I'm going to go to this offset command right here, select that yellow curve, and then just kind of drag it in or drag it out. Notice how it offsets. I want to just drag it in a little bit. And we're going to place a dimension then from that edge to that edge. And we are going to make that 15. So we should now see that projected curve. We took the curve, projected it up, offset it, and linked it. Okay. Is that good? So we can OK this, finish the sketch. We can now then go in and do an extrusion. We're going to do a cut extrusion. Select in the middle there, it should pick up that one. And I'm going to tell it to go through all surfaces and hit OK. And so now you see there's our gasket. And that gasket was pretty easily created from that inside region. Okay. So you can change things. You can adjust overall heights. At this point, what's really cool, because everything is linked in a hierarchy standpoint, you can make any changes that you need. So for instance, if we go back to the first sketch, sketch 1, and double click that, if you wanted to make this height, instead of 120, we wanted to make that 150, we would just double click on the 120, make that 150. Notice how it brought that down, finished the sketch. It updated the model for me because everything was linked together. That's the beauty of these constraints. What you're seeing is the two things, the constraints and then the way you're doing things in a stepwise process. Okay. Did that work for you, Sheila? Yeah, see, it didn't have to be exactly like mine, but it still did exactly what you wanted it to do. Okay. So there's some pretty cool things that we were doing a little bit of trimming and extending. We were seeing how those fillets could work really nicely, the offsets, and that project is pretty major. Okay, that's a major thing if you get into things a lot more involved in Inventor. Okay, is everybody okay with that? All right, so we're gonna take a look at chapter 12. Now this is building on this parent-child concept, which you're seeing right here. So this extrusion 2 is a child of parent 1, of extrusion 1. But we're going to see a little bit more of that, how this works a little bit more, which is kind of a really cool process. So you can save this drawing if you like. I'm going to open up a new drawing, but this drawing is going to be in inches. Okay, so we're going to go back to our plane, or our not our planes, but we're going to go back to the inch mode. Okay. So when you start this drawing, start a new drawing, we're going to go back to the English template and make sure you use the standard English template and create. Okay. So your part 1, by the way, is still out there. If you want to you want to mess with that, you can, or save it. If not, you can discard it, but we're going to start this new one. So if you're looking through in the book with me, we are going to design this thing called a U-bracket. And we're going to do this through several processes, which is kind of neat because we're going to actually have alternate designs in the same file, which is really cool. You'll like this. All right, so we're going to also talk a little bit about planes here. We have the ability to turn planes on. We haven't done that before, so I want you to go to this origin section, open that up, and notice that you're going to see the plane values there. You've got the XY plane, you've got the XZ plane, and the YZ plane, and then you also have your axes, X, Y, and Z. So right now, those are all invisible. So what we're going to do is make those visible so we can work off of these things really effectively. So if you click on the right click on the X, Y, or the YZ plane, you'll notice there's a value there called visibility. If you select visibility, you just made that plane visible. Come down to the other planes, make them visible as well. So these are going to be visible for us at all times. And notice if you do a shift and middle mouse key, you can now see your planes at any section that you want. Okay. So we are going to start out a sketch using what's called the ZX plane. Okay, so I am going to go into the sketch, touch it down here, make sure that it's saying the XZ plane, okay, or the ZX plane, however you want to look at it. So we're going to select that. So it also should probably be saying top here. Now, sometimes my top doesn't show up top side, it's rotated like that. So I would suggest that you rotate it so that you can see it like that, okay? All right, is everybody okay so far? So we're gonna generate a really cool thing called a slot. It's kind of like a rectangle, except it has two corners, two edges that are rounded. So I'm gonna go up to the rectangle command here, and I'm going to generate this thing called a slot, which is center to center. So we're going to do a slot center to center. I want you to come down here and pick a point, and then come over here and pick it. Now just make sure that this guy is coincident with the edge of the plane above it. And then you're going to drag it like this. Don't worry about its size. We're going to fix all this later. If you go out into 3D mode, you'll notice how that looks. So you notice that edge is parallel with that plane, and it's perpendicular to that plane. So that's what we should be looking at there, okay? So I'm going to put her back in a top mode. And we are going to then generate a few holes that are going to be coincident or locked into this position here and here. So I'm going to go up and do a circle, a center point circle. Select that guy. When you get the green dot that pops up, bring one in here. Do the same thing over here so that they are going to be concentric. Okay, so those are concentric settings. So we're going to now put some constraints on here with utilizing our dimensions. Okay, so the first constraint I'm going to throw in here is a dimension from the center of the slot hole to the center like that. Again, don't worry about the dimensions yet. We'll fix these guys later. Okay. We're going to give it a diameter dimension here, which is going to fix the width of this thing. I'm going to go ahead and lock this thing down with reference to this origin here. So I'm going to throw a dimension from the center of that circle to this plane right here, which is going to go to that. Now that's not the one I wanted, but that's a good one too. So I need that one there. So I'm going from center to that plane, and I also want to go from center to this plane over here. So you should have two, okay? So this one's going to lock it down left and right. This one's going to lock it down top and bottom, okay? Are we constrained all the way? Does anybody know yet? we don't have any values, what, on these circles right here? Those guys don't have any constraints on them? Okay. So we're going to place, I'm going to place one constraint right there, and I'll get these fixed here in a minute. Okay, so what we're going to want to do is start typing in values. So I want the distance from the center of a circle to center of a circle, whatever that is, I want that to be 5 units. So I'm going to type in 5 now. So your part's probably going to grow like that, real big. I want this guy locked in so that the center of this slot is running half the distance here. So this one that you did from the center over, I'm going to double click on this, and we're going to make this that dimension divided by 2. Okay, so what I did was I said, whatever this total dimension is here, I want this dimension to be half of that. So again, what I did is I clicked on it. You click on that dimension, it grabs that D value, and then say divided by 2. Okay. So you get that this guy is telling me this guy is a function of something. So what's cool about this is if this changes to 10, that'll be 5. If that changes to 6, that'll be 3. So it's calculating that for you. It's referencing it. All right. We're going to make the diameter of this guy here, the outside, or the radius rather, we're going to make that 1 unit. So your part's going to grow like that. So the overall dimension of it now is 5 units from center to center, and it's 2 inches this way. Okay, Kevin, I'll be right there. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set this line so that it's coincident with that. So I'm going to make that little dimension right there. I'm going to make that 0. Okay, so lock that up. What's up, Tim? You must have been typing it in wrong. Yeah. Okay. We good? 5 units, center. It's coincident with the planes, right? So the only other thing we need to do is set the diameters. So this little circle here, I'm going to make that 0.5. This one doesn't have a dimension, so what I'm going to do is place this dimension. I'm going to place a dimension on this guy, and I want that to be equal to that one. So just click on it and OK it, and you got them there. Everything's good now. Okay, so with your dimension, we got all the constraints we need. And you can actually check this out. If you go ahead and right click to hit OK, if we go to the Manage tool, Manage tab, there's a thing up here called Parameters. What parameters pulls up, and it shows me all of the dimensions that I've got in there and how they're working functionally. So notice you got 5 inches, 1 inch. Notice where I had anything locked down. It's that dimension divided by 2. So there's a function. And then the other ones are equal or coincident. So you can actually go in there and see what's going on with that. You can change things. You can edit things in here. Okay. But just to show you that that's in there, you got that. So I'm going to go ahead and just cancel that. So if everything looks good for you, we're going to go ahead and finish this sketch. And I want you to notice when you come out, you can see how all the planes are locked together right in the center of that guy. And the planes are remaining visible because we made them visible over here. Okay, so we're going to keep these guys visible for a while. I'm going to go ahead and collapse that folder. So now what I want to do is we're going to perform an extrusion on this. So we're going to go ahead and extrude. You may have to select it 4 places like that to get it to work properly. And we're going to make this extrusion a 1/2 inch. And when you get done, go ahead and hit OK. So you should have an extrusion. You might want to look at this guy just in 3 dimensions, just to make sure he looks right. But I want you to pay key attention to where those 3 planes come together, where the 2 planes come together. That's right in the center. And the 3rd plane is actually what the sketch is on. Okay, everybody with me on that? So we're going to go in and add something now. So this guy is going to form the parent for the whole thing. And what we're going to now do is build a secondary piece that's going to be linked to this. So we're going to utilize that middle plane right there, that X, Y plane, but we're not going to be able to see through our part. So the first thing we're going to do is set this part so it's viewable through it. So we're going to go to the View tab, Visual Style, and in there, notice we are set to a shaded kind of mode. If we set this to a wireframe, notice as we look through this, we can see through everything. And that's the kind of mode we want to work in right now, so that we can see through as we work on this. Everybody get that to work for them? It's called a wireframe view. Told? Not getting it, or it's not working? Okay, go to the View tab at the very top. Go to the Visual Styles. Looks like your base is 1 inch instead of a half. You can change that later, though. But you need to check that, all right? Actually, you could just check it real quick right now before we move on and fix it. Okay, so we're going to draw an arc that's going to be in this plane right here, and that's going to be another type of thing, but it's going to be actually linked to this guy, this parent. So we're going to have what we call a parent and a child. So I want you to go back to the Sketch tab, select your Start Sketch. I want you to select that XY plane, the XY plane, and it should look like that. And this is the reason that we needed to do that into a wireframe, because we wouldn't be able to see it any other way. So we're going to generate an arc. We're going to do what's called a center point arc. I want you to take the center point down here where the planes intersect. When you get the green dot, you can click it. Come over here on this side. Don't worry about the distance, but make sure you get that coincidence symbol to show up. That means it's coincident with the base. Drag it across to another coincident point. So what you're going to do is get like a half shell like that. So that's an exactly 180-degree arc. You can then right-click and hit OK. So if you zoom or you do a 3D view around, you can see exactly what you've done. We've placed it on that line. It's coincident to that line. So what we're now going to do is add a line from the end of the arc here to the end of the arc there. Okay, so I'm going to go into the line command, snap into that to make sure you get the other end. All right, so what we've done is we made a half circle and then we cut a line across. But here's the thing to understand, that half circle is linked to that base, okay, because it's coincident with it, so that becomes the parent and this guy becomes a child. So if the base changes, the child will change with it, okay, right? All right, so we are ready to kill this sketch, or not kill it. We're ready to change. Oh, we've got to do one more thing. We need to constrain this with a radius. I forgot to do that. So I'm going to place a dimension on this guy. And we want that radius to be 1.75. So not only did the arc change size, but so did the line that connects it. Okay. So now you're ready to go ahead and finish the sketch. All right. So we're going to go ahead and now do an extrusion. And I'm going to go to 3D model, extrude, select that guy right there. We are going to do what's called a symmetric extrusion, symmetric. And we are going to make that symmetric extrusion. We're going to give it a value of 2.5. So it's going to go half the distance each way. Okay. All right, did that work? If that looks good, go ahead and OK it. And you notice it's kind of hard to visualize what's going on in this view because this is a wireframe. So I'm going to go back up to my view mode and change that visual style back to a shaded, or you can do shaded with edges, whichever works. And if you look at this thing now, you should notice everything should be nice and in line like that. And what we have over here, 2 extrusions. The second extrusion is linked to the sketch, and that is also linked back to that first one. So you have the parent is extrusion 1 with its sketch, and the child is extrusion 2. Okay, is that good? We're going to now place a cut feature in this guy. We're going to punch a hole through this guy. We'll punch it through. So what we're going to do is do another sketch. Do a sketch. I'm going to click on that top or that front face. So it should pop it in like that for you. And we're going to generate just a normal rectangle. But I want you to do the rectangle in such a way that you make it coincident with that edge down there, okay? So this is going to be coincident with that. Don't worry about its size. We're ultimately going to fix it, all right? So now this thing is going to be a child off of the half cylinder, which is a child off of the base, okay? So you got this parent-child, parent-child, parent-child relationship. So let's throw a few dimensions in this. I'm going to want to have this overall dimension this way. That's going to be, we're going to make that 1 inch. Actually, I think it's, I can't read mine. Oh, it's 2. I'm sorry, it's 2. It's okay if you place it at 1. We'll fix it. This one here is 1 inch, so I think I used the wrong one. Okay, so you can go ahead and change this one. Just double click on him, make him 2 inches. So I want to make this guy centered. So I want it centered on this edge. So I'm going to dimension it from that edge to that face. And I'm going to make that a function of this. So I'm going to click on this guy, divided by 2, and that should center it left and right. Okay. That's really, once you start to understand those function dimensions, that's really cool, because this just drives everything else. Okay, are we good? All right, so we're done with this sketch. So we're now going to do a cut extrusion through this guy. So we're going to select extrusion, go to 3D model. If it's not showing up, go to extrude. Select that guy, hit that cut, and make it go through all, and then hit OK. And you should now see what you have is a hole punched out through that. And we've got like 80% of our U bracket is done at this point. So the planes now have kind of outlived their usefulness at this point, so we're going to turn them off because it makes it a little tougher to see. So I'm going to go ahead and set the visibility of these guys off for now. So all you have to do is click on one plane, shift, and then click on the bottom plane. Then you can right click and set your visibility all off in one fell swoop, do them that way. Okay, so once you get them, they're turned off. They can be turned on at any point. The cool thing is, though, if you don't want to see them, there you got them. Okay. All right. So we are going to do a cut feature now. We're going to have a little hole that's going to drill down through the top, okay? And it's going to be linked to this bottom face. We're going to link it to that guy. So what we're going to do is go into a sketch mode, start your sketch, select that bottom face, and we're going to bring a circle right in the middle of that thing. So notice it shows me the centroid. Just go ahead and select it. Don't worry about its size. Just place it. When you're done, go ahead and right click and hit OK. We're going to throw a simple dimension on that. So I'm going to go ahead and dimension that. And we'll make this hole 0.25. All right, so what we're going to do is finish that sketch. Make sure that you can see the sketch, like my view. Going to go ahead and do an extrusion. Select it into a cut mode and do what's called a through all and hit OK. So what you should now do is see that, you should see that like that. All right, and there we have it. All right, so one of the things that you might want to do, I think we talked about this last week, was rename things over here. So I'm going to have these guys modify this stuff, so I'm going to rename it. So I'm going to double click slowly on the extrusion 1, and we're going to call that base. So that's our base extrusion, or that's our base object actually. We're going to double click slowly on extrusion 2, and we're going to call that main body. So that's the half cylinder. We're going to go into the extrusion 3, rename that. We'll call that rectangular cut. So we're just calling that a rectangular cut. And then we're going to put this last guy, we're going to call that a center drill, which means we are using that as a center drill hole. Okay. So remember, we don't have to do that, but that sure is nice when you start looking at this stuff, because if you do make changes or want to make changes, you got those abilities to do that. All right. So if you want to change some parent dimensioning, okay, let's go to the rectangular cut. Right click on rectangular cut for me. And you'll get shortcuts that pop out under rectangular cut. We're going to do what's called show a dimension. I think we looked at this last week. So if we would like to change the height from 1 inch to 7.5, double click your height, change that to 0.75 and accept that dimension. You'll notice that it changed the sketch, but you notice it didn't change the part. So what you have to do is you have to do what's called an update. So up at the top here, up at the top there, you've got this guy that's called a local update. If you locally update it, it makes the change for you. And if you go back and look here, you'll notice that the drill hole went with it because the drill hole was linked to that rectangular cut. So if the rectangular cut changed, the drill hole did with it, right? Everybody see that? That's an important concept right there. All right, so let's go ahead. We'll change that back. We're going to go back to the rectangular cut, show dimension, double click that, go ahead and make that 1 unit, and then you can just do your local update, and we're good. Okay? So it's showing you what the author is trying to show you is the cool thing about this is you have the ability to make those changes, especially the way they're linked, parent, child, parent, child, parent, child. Okay. So here's the really cool thing. If we wanted, like, say, not show a cut, but we want to do a different type of cut in there, but we don't want to discard this cut, what we can do is what's called a suppression. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to right click on the rectangular cut, and notice down about midway there's this thing that says suppress your feature. So if you click on that, it's kind of like turning a layer off more or less, except you're turning that feature off. Notice when you did that, what happened? The cut's no longer there, but also the drill hole's no longer there because the drill hole was linked to that, right? And notice it automatically suppressed the drill, but you couldn't unsuppress it. I don't think if you tried to unsuppress it, I don't think it'll let you, number one. If I tried to unsuppress it, oh, if I unsuppress that, it unsuppresses everything, right? So because they're linked. So yeah, you can't unsuppress the one if it's linked to the parent. So what we're going to do is do do some changes. I'm going to make this drill hole use a different approach for it. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to create a drill hole using a different approach. So you can go ahead and unsuppress the features. Just go ahead and unsuppress it. We're going to see how that unsuppression works. And what we're going to do is click on the drill hole, and we're going to do what's called a delete. Go ahead and hit OK. Because that thing is linked to that feature alone, it won't work with other features. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to make a different type of drill hole that might be better, a better way of doing it. So I want you to make the XZ plane visible. So we're going to make the XZ plane visible. Right click on that, hit visibility. So that shows us the XZ plane there is visible. And we are going to start the 2D sketch on that plane. And you might want to do it so that you can see it like that. So I'm actually going to put my drill hole down on this plane is what we're going to do. So the idea is that's why we activated this. I'm going to put my circle in, make sure that you attach it to that point right there, and don't worry about its size. So I just put it in the middle. I'm going to go ahead and dimension this thing. And we will make that also a 0.25 diameter. Okay. So instead of having it attached to that upper surface, we now have it attached down to something different. We're going to extrude that up, and now what's going to happen is whether that cut feature is there or not, the drill hole should still work. Okay. So what we're going to do is once you have this guy placed, dimension, go ahead and finish the sketch. We're going to extrude that guy. Make sure you're doing a cut extrusion. Do it through all and hit OK. Notice your drill hole is still up there now. Okay, it should have come back up through it. Is that working for everybody? All right, so now do this for me. Go ahead and suppress the rectangular cut. Suppress the rectangular cut feature. You notice the hole is still there because the hole is no longer a child off of the rectangular cut. Okay, it's a different linking. Does that make sense? That's actually a really, really cool feature. Okay. So we're going to leave that rectangular cut. We're going to leave that rectangular cut suppressed, and we're going to do a different circle cut. We're going to make a cut that's circular. So what we're going to do is do that off of this face right here. So we're going to go 2D sketch, right like that, and we're going to generate. That center point, actually, I'll tell you what. Oh, that'll work. That'll work, I think. So we're going to just draw a circle and do it to the center of that and just pull it out. So those circles should be coincident like that. So if you're looking at it like that, you should have two circles like that. Not two, but you have them concentric. And when you get done, go ahead and finish the sketch. Oh, I forgot to dimension it. No big deal. Just go ahead and double click on that sketch. Brings us right back to it. Go ahead and we'll dimension it. Let's do a dimension on there. Let's make that diameter 2.5. So it should be like that, 2.5. Now you can finish the sketch. I just jumped the gun on that. All right, so we're going to go ahead and extrude. I'm just going to extrude I'm going to do a cut extrusion, and I'm going to do it through all, and I'm going to hit OK. So notice what's happening here is now you have that feature, okay, and the drill hole still works. Notice that. That's pretty cool. If you unsuppress your other feature, notice it brings them together. So you see how that works? If you suppress your other extrusion that we just did, notice you've got two designs in one model is what's doing. By suppressing the one, having the other, or suppressing the other, having the other one out, what you have two designs in one model, which is pretty cool. And so that whole process is really awesome the way that works. So I'm going to unsuppress the extrusion that I just did here. And I'm going to suppress the rectangular cut because that's the one I actually, let's say that's the one I actually decided that's the one I want to use. So there we've got that. And go ahead and you can kick off the visibility on that plane that you had. And let's add a material to this now. So that'll be our final thing. So we're going to go up to the part name, right click on the part name, hit I properties. And we're going to go to the physical tab. And under the physical tab where you have material, right now it's called a generic. And we can grab something nice and shiny if you want. Excuse me. So you could do a lot of different things in here, but I'm going to grab, let's say, let's do gold. Gold looks nice. So I'm going to apply that, and this part now is basically, it thinks it's gold. It's made out of gold. And of course, that would be a pretty expensive part. But notice how that looks. And also all those properties associated with that, like the density and all of that, that is coming from that material. So notice the mass and the area and the volume, all of that stuff is coming from that material. So if we change that material from gold, let's say, to stainless steel, that's going to actually change that up as well. So you can notice then. All right. Okay. So this is a pretty cool process. These two things we went through today, there's a lot going on in there. Hopefully it's starting to get easier as you do this. Okay. But it's real important that browser. Hopefully you're understanding in Inventor that browser is really, really key. There's a lot going on over here, and it's kind of like AutoCAD. You can do multiple things. You can do things up through the ribbon, but you can also do things over in the browser as well. Okay. Any questions? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.